Today we're talking about what I consider the worst defense item in Smite. Before we get started, a quick note: the gameplay footage in the background was made with more than 24 hours of not getting any sleep, so forgive me for buying some mana pots on Kukulin, and whatever else weird stuff you may see in that footage. But which item am I talking about? Is it Mail of Renewal? Is it Talisman of Energy? No. It's an item that only really fulfills one purpose in the game, or at least is intended to fulfill one purpose, but unfortunately doesn't even do that job all too well. And that item is Spectral Armor. Nick asked me on YouTube today why I don't mention Spectral Armor as a counter for Mercury. And I want to explain that a little bit more in detail than I did in that comment where I used more of a theoretical example. First, let's look at the stats of Spectral Armor. The item is 2100 gold, so relatively cheap, but not too cheap. It comes with 60 physical protection, 300 mana, 10 MP5 and 20% crowd control reduction. These stats aren't terrible. It gives you a lot of mana, a lot of sustain, and a fair bit of defense. On the other hand, 60 physical defense isn't insane either. It's a good value, but there are items that offer more. And Spectral Armor does not come with any other damage mitigation or health on top of that, outside of that little passive. And that passive is critical strikes only deal 60% bonus damage to you instead of 100%. So this is an item to counter crits. And as such, it kind of makes sense, I guess, that it would reduce crit damage. What is a bit weird to me in this context is the rest of the stats. Mana doesn't really have anything to do with crits, and neither does crowd control reduction, though there is some sort of context where this makes a little bit more sense, but we'll get to that. Now, we also have another physical defense item in the game that is specifically against basic attacks, and that is Hide of the Nemean Lion. And Hide of the Nemean Lion's existence basically makes it so that there is no reason to build Spectral Armor. Hide of the Nemean Lion is 2200 gold, so a 100 gold price difference. It also has 70 physical protection, so 10 more than Spectral Armor. Again, it's only geared against physical damage as well, it doesn't have any health, but again, also 10 more protection. It has 200 mana, so 100 mana less, but has 20 MP5, so a fair bit more mana sustain, which I personally value a lot more. The passive here is reflects 25% of all basic attack damage back to the attacker as physical damage. And this is where things get kind of funny. Imagine you're a character that deals 100 damage with a basic attack. So if you crit without Deathbringer, without any other modifiers, you would deal 200 damage with a basic attack. Now Spectral Armor will reduce the damage that you deal. You only deal 60% of the bonus damage from the crit. That doesn't mean 60% of the entire damage, and as such, your total damage would be 160 damage instead. But at the same time, we have Hide of the Nemean Lion here. And Hide of the Nemean Lion deals 25% of the damage back to the attacker. So while the attacker would deal 200 damage here, they would also take 50 damage themselves. So you already take more damage than Spectral Armor would reduce. But there's an important difference here, and that is that Hide of the Nemean Lion works before the mitigation. That means that even if you only took half the damage because you have a lot of protection, you would still reflect back 50 damage. This damage is also affected by the enemy's mitigation, but a high damage dealer that is worried about getting damage reflected back typically doesn't have that much protection that would have an impact here. So even if you took 100 damage, you would still maybe deal 35 damage back, whereas Spectral Armor's impact would already be drastically lowered. And you have to keep in mind that the moment somebody builds Hide of the Nemean Lion or Spectral Armor, they will already have a lot of mitigation between the base defense and the item's protections. But let's look at this in a more precise example. Our target here will be a level 20 Jingwei with only either Hide of the Nemean Lion or Spectral Armor, nothing else, because the rest of our items would typically be damage items. So this is if a carry or any squishy tries to counter you in a single item. This whole test would go even more in favor of Hide of the Nemean Lion if we look at a tank building this, because they have more protection and therefore more mitigation. They should go without saying. But we're gonna look at the worst case example in terms of how much other health or protection you have. So the guard hitting the Jingwei with Height of the Nemean Lion is a level 20 Mercury with various different builds that we will go through, who will not have his passive up or will not have taken any steps. Let's start with the stats for Height of the Nemean Lion. If you had no items at all, the basic attack damage would be 34 and the mitigated damage would be 47. The reflect damage from Height of the Nemean Lion would be 12, whereas 8 damage would be mitigated here. To see what impact Deathbringer has here, we can now take Deathbringer as a single crit basic attack, dealing 116 damage and leaving us with 161 mitigated. The reflected damage here would be 41, with 29 being mitigated. On the other hand, we also have Rage here. With Rage with a single crit, so no amplifier from Deathbringer, the damage would be 84 and the mitigated damage would be 117. The reflect damage on Nemean would be 30, with 21 damage being mitigated from the reflection. And now let's look at a full, almost late game build of Golden Blade, Warrior Tabai, Rage, Deathbringer, Bloodforge, as well as Titan's Bane, which, by the way, is beneficial in regards to Spectral Armor here, as Titan's Bane lowers your protection percentage-wise, or rather penetrates through it. So the damage in this case with a normal basic attack would be 172, and the mitigated damage would be 170. The reflected damage would therefore be 50, with 35 reflection being mitigated. The crit of the same build would deal 395 damage, with 391 being mitigated, and the reflection damage being 116, with 81 being mitigated. So far so good, but how do the numbers look for Spectral Armor, which should reduce this damage? The damage from a basic attack would now be 35 because the item has a little bit less protection, with 45 being mitigated. A crit with Deathbringer only would deal 100 damage instead of 116, and there would be 129 mitigated damage. With Rage, a crit would deal 70 damage and 91 mitigated. With a full build, the basic attack damage would be 176, again slightly higher than the other build because of less protections, with 166 mitigated. The crit, on the other hand, would deal 334 damage, with 315 mitigated. Right, so what do we do with these numbers now? We compare them directly between the extra damage that you would take from Height of the Nemean Lion versus the damage reduction for the target through Spectral Armor. In the case of a normal basic attack, would actually take a little bit of extra damage with Spectral Armor, just 1 extra damage because, again, we don't have as much protection. On the other hand, the extra damage you would take from a Reflect in Nemean's case is 12. That's not so surprising, but the next one is interesting. With Deathbringer with a crit as a single item, we would take 16 less damage. Our attacker, on the other hand, for that same attack, would take 41 more damage. The same happens with the crit Rage build pretty much. Would take 14 less damage, but the enemy would take 30 extra damage, so double here as well. In the case of an enemy basic attacking you and dealing a high amount of damage without critting, you would actually take an additional 4 damage here when you're wearing Spectral Armor. On the other hand, with Height of the Nemean Lion, the enemy would take 50 extra damage. But then, last but not least, with a full build, we would take 61 less damage from a crit with the Deathbringer effect as well. Meanwhile, the enemy attacking us, the Mercury, would take 116 extra damage. So all in all, across all levels, we roughly reflect twice as much back as we could reduce in damage by having Spectral Armor. And this is only for crits. With every basic attack, the enemy takes significantly more damage that isn't made up for by Spectral Armor in any way. So Height of the Nemean Lion is a very versatile item that punishes all basic attackers, even magical ones, by reflecting their damage back, whereas Spectral Armor has an absolute niche use that I will never see because I'd always pick Nemean Lion over it. Now you could rightfully say, but what about ability guards that can crit? We have 2 that are really relevant here, and those are Naja and Circuit. And you know what the deal with those guys is? they have other things that are a lot more scary than the crit by itself. If you're looking to counter these guards, you're looking for items like Magi's Blessing. You're looking for items like Mantle of Discord. You're looking for items like Spirit Robe, anything that reduces the damage that you take after their CC or prevents the CC in the first place or prevents them from bursting you entirely. The only thing that Spectral Armor can help with here is the fact that it has 20% crowd control reduction, but that's about it really. And if you're just building it for that, for these two niche cases, I think you probably could think of better options for that. And this is honestly kind of sad to me because I really enjoyed the old Spectral Armor with its fear effect that they removed, and I thought that was more of an interesting niche item that had some valid uses but not too many. And last but not least, some of you may propose that Spectral Armor and Nemean could be built together. Sure, technically yes, but again, I would have so many other items that would choose over it in any situations, be it other protection items with better effects, be it items with more health, or be it even items that have a little bit of damage on them. And again, for tanks that have multiple defense items, Spectral Armor is relatively worse in a larger scale even than Nemean is here. And with that, thank you guys for watching. I hope this gave you an interesting look into the, in my opinion, worst item in the game. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you're new to the channel, feel free to click the sub button and maybe the bell, it really helps me out. And other than that, see you for the next one tomorrow. DukeSloth, out.